what are their budget situations looking like as compared to ours, and then also the compensation piece for those nearby jurisdictions, and in particular Arlington.
Yeah, it is. It's not good anywhere. What I've learned from, and I'll just share two in particular. So we'll start with Arlington. After talking with my colleague Cynthia Johnson, who's the interim superintendent there, they have a revenue sharing agreement with the Board of Supervisors, and it appears that they're going to have to take a reduction in revenue for next year as well, not looking at any compensation increases across the board. And Fairfax County is looking like they're going to get a small amount of transfer from their county board of supervisors, but it won't do much of what they had hoped to do. And that includes that it doesn't look like they're going to do any compensation increases either. So what we're seeing around the region and of my regional colleagues is nobody's able to do anything with compensation right now.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question?
That does answer my question. Just wanted to make sure that, just seeing how we are lining up with other folks around us, which I assumed would be, they would have some challenges as we are with this. And then I guess one follow-up question, going into this and we're taking the $500,000 reduction, how confident are we at kind of staying in this kind of middle scenario from the general government side?
We've had really good conversations with Ms. Bawa and Mr. Shields, and they presented us with a number of different scenarios, and there's kind of a bad case, a middling case, and then a worst case. And this is sort of the mid case scenario, and I think right now we all feel pretty confident this is what we want to work towards, is this middle scenario. If things change, what I did hear from Mr. Shields was that if we got to a point where we had to do some massive reductions or had to make major changes in class sizes or things like that, that he would be open to coming back and having a conversation to see how they may be able to help us out. So I think we've picked in some ways the right lane to move down, of partnership, of the appropriate amount of conservatism within the budgeting process, and doing what I think is probably right for our system right now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Webb. Other questions from anyone else on the board? Mr. Rudinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dr. Needham, less a question than a comment. I appreciate all the work you and your staff, especially Ms. Michael and Ms. Kopic, have done. I know this is a very, very difficult time. I also wanted to emphasize that I think your priorities for the future are exactly right. I would be not sticking to my normal line of comments if I didn't say that, if more revenue does come in, my at least initial thought is that the highest priority for the school system not only ought to be compensation, it ought to be with a step within the compensation structure. The reason being that I think steps are how we reward our staff for their continuing support and developing experience. And I think there is going to be a reasonable likelihood of reduction in the cost of living, or at least a flattening of cost of living increases because of the economic downturn. So I don't know what's possible. I don't know what the amounts would be, but if we could get to the point where we could give a step partway through next year, or a half a step if that's necessary, followed by maybe something the following year, I would be strongly in favor of that in the abstract. Thank you.
Thank you for saying that. I think that follows sort of our thinking as well. The one thing we worry about, and I just put it out there for the board, is any kind of deferred step. So if we were to do a full step in December, It would be a half a year with a full step, which would mean that the following year, if we wanted to do another step, we'd really have to fund a step and a half to make up for the other half that wasn't funded this year. So it just creates a little bit of a structural problem, but if economics look like they're turning around, I think it's a good way to move. I think we'd like to look at that.
Thank you, Dr. Noonan. Other questions from anyone on the board? I have a couple of clarifying questions I could ask, and it just building on things. The first one is just to build on a question that Ms. Downs asked. I wanted to make sure. So I'm aware that general government is talking about hiring freeze as one mechanism to handle the impacts of the budget changes. And my interpretation of this, your answer to Ms. Downs' question would be that it isn't an absolute hiring freeze so much as it is a reprioritization and reexamination of the highest priority hires. Is that a fair summary?
That is a 100% fair summary. One of the things that we really want to take the approach of is anytime there's a vacancy, there's an opportunity. And the opportunity is to look at, are we doing the right work for the right reasons? So that becomes part of our priority as well. So yes.
Okay, thanks. And then another question following on. So the use of fund balance this year, right, comes with the needing to be careful about the possibility of making that up next year. But it leads me to the question: what is our fund balance? You know, what are our reserves right now if we had to sort of just bottom line it for somebody? And with this change, how close are we? You know, how much of a reduction is that taking us to an area where there's a level of discomfort? So,
Kristen, you want to take a shot at that one?
Yes. So when we do,
we're already uncomfortable, but she could probably.
well, yeah, sure, but you understand what I mean.
So when we look at this current fiscal year, we were budgeting to use $450,000 in fund balance. So we're currently projecting that we'll use less than that level. At that $450,000 level, it would only take us just a couple of years to fully exhaust our fund balance. And the budget that we've developed for next year also has another $450,000 in fund balance. So I am confident that we are fine for both of those years. But again, for a long-term strategy, we need to be cautious. Also, in terms of fund balance, the general government, as Dr. Noonan indicated, did transfer that $389,000 to us in the CIP fund. And we've moved forward with the items related to security, but we're really waiting to ensure that we are in an okay financial position before we move forward with the things that we need, but that we felt we could defer slightly to ensure that we had adequate fund balance. When we look at our other funds, our fund with the lowest level of fund balance is our food service fund. They have just over 100,000 in fund balance. So next month when we come back, we can continue to look at fund balance and give some updated projections there.
Thanks. I think that would be helpful just to make sure that we are tracking and able to report out the exact amount of fund balance we've got and sort of what's the burn rate. It is good to see the idea of reducing 450K down to 300,000, build a little extra capacity into the system. But I just want to make sure that we have a good handle on how close we are getting to that and what level of conservatism we're going to need to be looking at on that one. So. Are there any other comments or questions from anybody on the board on the budget presentation? Seeing none, I will take a page out of the usual playbook and echo I think Mr. Reidinger's very good summary and say that I agree that I want to say thank you to Dr. Noonan, you and Ms. Michael and Ms. Kopic and your whole staff has been working on putting together this budget, and agree, I think, with Mr. Reidinger that for my own self, should things get better in the fall, that looking at compensation in the form of a step would be my highest priority personally. But that's just speaking for myself. So thank you very much for all the work that you've done to this point.
It's not been totally pleasurable, but I do want to say a special shout out to Michelle Kopic. I think she's been recognized a number of times tonight, but she really took every salary file right down to the number and really has worked hard to sort of forensically scrub the budget and has done an outstanding job, and just really proud of her work. So thanks to Michelle and to Kristen as well.
Well, thank you very much. At this point, we'll go ahead and move forward to our business and action information. And the first action in there is an item that builds on our conversation we just had, which is an authorization for the school board chair to sign a budget amendment letter to the city council. So 4.01, and I will turn it back to Dr. Noonan for further context setting.
Yeah, thank you. As I mentioned in the meeting last week, we really felt like the best method to proceed with the budget this year was to not do another adopted advertised budget, but instead write a memo to the city council. And so with the help of Tricia Minson and with Kristen Michael and William Bates and some others, we did craft a memo that essentially, one, talks about the really great partnership that we're continuing to try to keep and maintain with our general government friends. The second is that we recognize certainly what the context of the situation is. We've got the numbers, we see what's happening. The third is we really feel like we can be a good partner with the general government. And as a consequence of that, really feel like we could take that $500,000 reduction, but also recognize and end with this, that we feel like if there are additional revenues that become available, we do want to reap the benefits of those as well. So we sent a draft out to all of you in the Friday update to take a look at. I know that there were a couple of questions that came back, but Ms. Minson, if there's anything I missed in that sort of very brief summary, I'd certainly welcome you to chime in.
No, I think you covered it.
Thank you, Dr. Noonan. Thank you, Ms. Minson. So there was, I know of a comment that I have, but I would like to ask for others to chime in first if there are comments or questions that that you have on the draft that sits before us. Not seeing any hands. I guess I'll ask, my question is this, it's actually a suggestion primarily, which is in paragraph 3, the sentence that begins based on their guidance and ends with reduction of the city's budget transfer by 500,000. My suggestion is just that we add then what the transfer amount would be with that change, so that it, eliminates any ambiguity. So it would be based on their guidance all the way through. City budget transfer, reduction of the city's budget transfer by $500,000 to the amount of X. Just for additional clarity, I think. How does that resonate or not with folks? No shaking heads at least, so we'll go with the nod from Ms. Johnson on that one. The other comments I have are really wording changes, stylistic, and so that's really not substantive. But are there any questions that actually would take anything with the substance of it beyond that one? All right, I am not seeing any at this point. So I guess in keeping with the tradition of looking at policies really closely, I'll just put in 2 insertions and suggest that the phrase "as an initial matter," just, I don't know, never mind. It's not important. We can go with it as it is, I think, and we'll just move on from there. We're getting into the weeds. But that one addition would be helpful. So with that addition, I think, and I'm not seeing any objections, unless anybody has additional information they want to make, there is a motion that would need to be made.
I guess I move that the Falls Church School Board authorize the school board chair to sign a FY21 budget amendment letter to the city council.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Russell. Thank you, Mr. Webb, for the second. Ms. Goodell.
Sorry about that. Sure. Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Ms. Dimick,
Yes.
Ms. Downs,
Yes.
Ms. Litton,
Yes.
Mr. Reitinger,
Yes.
Ms. Russell,
Yes.
and Mr. Webb.
Yes.
All right, thank you. The motion passes.
Thank you very much. Then the next item for business tonight is Verizon easement for the new George Mason High School. And Dr. Noonan.
Sure. Thank you, Chair Anderson.